Hello, everyone. My name is Hongwu Wang. I sit on the board of the UVA Club of Seattle. Welcome to this event. A few reminders for all the attendees, if you can remain muted and hold all your questions for the end. I also want to do a quick plug for our next event, which is a mini student celebration on April the 23rd at the Phoenix Center. All are welcome to join us as we celebrate the class of 2026. If you have not registered for our newsletter, you can scan the QR code on the screen. I will also put this QR code in the IM window. So if you register, you will sign up for our newsletter, and we will be stay informed about our future event. Today's discussion is moderated by Mr. Tilden Winston of UVA Class of 2021. He is my fellow board member. Tilden moved to Seattle last summer and is currently a software engineer at Microsoft. Tilden, to you.
Thanks for that intro. And without further ado, we're going to start by going around and giving all of our panelists a chance to introduce themselves and a little bit about what their company does. I guess to start us off, Dan?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Snyder, and I'm CEO and founder of a company called The Playbook, which is a platform that I recently launched following exiting a company called MolecularMD, which is based in Portland, Oregon, a company that was focused in a cancer diagnostic space, and that's what kind of brought me to the Northwest from the East Coast. And so at The Playbook, really focus on partnering with founders and CEOs in the area of customer development, which basically, in parallel with product development, building a customer development strategy that will lead to earlier scale and growth, and also to kind of help support valuations between different funding rounds. Pretty much my entire career, I've been focused in the kind of life science, health sciences industry, and specifically in diagnostics, molecular diagnostics, so genomics, and various types of cancer diagnostics. And this has been particularly a growing space, and obviously with COVID and like PCR testing. So that's been a large type of technology that I've been involved in with previous companies. And so now I'm working through The Playbook, working with 3 different companies in different stages of commercial development, kind of a seed stage company, a Series A company, as well as a more mature company looking to further scale their commercial efforts.
Thanks for that, Dan. And we're going to pass on to Logan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Logan Clements. I'm an event producer and owner of Logan Strategy Group. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but I'm a solopreneur. I'm my own company's only employee, but we've been in business for almost 6 years now doing event production. So everything from conferences to nonprofit galas to sporting events, and doing everything from this of virtual to hybrid production, as well as in-person production. Based in Seattle, but before Seattle was living in Shanghai, China. I majored in Chinese at UVA and used that in my events pre-COVID. Have not been able to really use it too much since, but definitely had to experience what to pivot as a small business from doing in-person event production all the way now to virtual and hybrid. And when I'm not doing events, I often like trying different sports. I was on the track team at UVA. I do not throw javelin or hammer anymore, but I always love trying out something different. And currently I'm learning snowboarding is my new passion this year.
All right, and on to Matt.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Matt Attaway. I'm Darden class of 14. I'm in the Seattle area. I'm probably the least entrepreneurial one on the entrepreneurship panel, but I made my way from out of Darden. I made my way to Microsoft, where I did a tour and ended up working on the acquisition of GitHub. And then after we acquired GitHub, went over and joined their strategic finance team. Just a heads up, I have a 6-year-old and a dog. If you hear any background noise when I'm speaking, it is undoubtedly them. But it's been a lot of fun to join GitHub. GitHub, for those of you who don't know, is a large developer company. We're kind of at We like to say we're at the center of like the developer world. We've got about 80 million developers on our platform. Some of those are large organizations and tech companies, but many of those are tiny single people working on OSS projects, or tiny people starting up companies who have a software development need. And so one of the cool things working in finance at GitHub is we kind of are at the center of kind of the push and pull between how do we go continue to build a great business that's growing and expanding and it has a healthy P&L, while at the same time continuing to be what we've always tried to be, which is a great place for single developers and small teams of developers to come have access to free tools or very low cost plans to have, to do the best software development on top of some of the best OSS development in the world. And so it's been a really fun and challenging role to play, and kind of keeping those two things in tension. So, excited to join the panel, and I'll bring probably a slightly different perspective than my other panelists, but I'm excited to be here today.
All right, and our final panelist. Why don't you go on ahead?
So my name is Stefan Bozek. I graduated from Darden in 2014 with Matt and Hung Wu. And I actually, after graduating, I bought a company called Lamatera. It's an e-commerce business selling high-end fashion accessories from Central and South American designs made by artisans that we work with hand in hand down in Central and South America. And so I've been running that for about 7 years now, have grown it and scaled it without raising any money, just on our own cash flow, and in a way that it's in a way that we found to be sustainable, which is pretty rare in e-commerce these days. And I live down in San Diego, or down from Seattle. I live in San Diego with my wife and my daughter, who's actually 1 today. And yeah, so you might hear her in the background as well. And looking forward to this panel.
All right, thanks for those introductions. And so we're gonna get started in on the kind of the meat of the panel with some questions. So we're actually gonna go back to Dan, and so kind of as a contrast, what Stefan was just saying. Dan, how to raise money is an important question that many are interested in. Maybe not Stefan, but others are. Do you have any kind of tips and perspective for the audience, kind of from your background in kind of the development space?
Yeah, I'll give some perspectives, and I'll start off with, I really don't like raising money. I love startups, but I don't like raising money. But I'm finding a way to develop better tactics and strategies, so I like it more. And I'll tell you why I don't like it, because, like I said, I'm focused on customer development, so I really like selling to customers and products to customers, but I don't necessarily like selling to investors. Because I kind of want to sell to them like customers, but it's a completely different approach and sale. And I would say often with in selling to investors, you're selling a vision, right? And where I always like to work from the customer out, but oftentimes when you're raising money, you don't have customers yet, so it's all about building that vision. But one thing I would say is that in terms of in fundraising, I think there's a lot of ways to waste a lot of time. In other words, there's a lot of sources for funding and a lot of angels who have money, etc. But I think the key is kind of finding who is really trying to target and develop the right profile for your investor, depending upon, again, where you are in the development of the company, depending upon your strategy, depending upon the type of partner that you want to work with. And I really think, and as we'll probably get into this, the whole concept of customer development, which is really a learning process and really trying to understand your customer profile before you can scale. And I think the same thing goes with the investor group, is really before going out and doing full pitches, etc., just talking to a lot of different types of investors, getting kind of understanding the different rationales of what, why are they investing? What do they want to get out of it? There's a lot of different reasons for that, and kind of just develop that profile in terms of who you think that, and who your right investor is, continue to test that. And that's one of those things that it does take time. but I think it can save a huge amount of time down the road, because again, you can go down a lot of rabbit holes, and once you get further down, you realize, wow, this is definitely not the right fit. And while there might be money there, which is attractive, if it's not a fit, there's no, it can really risk a business in terms of getting getting an investor involved in your business who's not a good fit.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to a question from Logan now. Logan, can you share with us your experience as a startup, but as the founder perspective, and kind of as the perspective as a solopreneur?
Yeah, thanks, Tilden. I think it's funny. I know, Matt, you mentioned that you were bringing a unique perspective to the panel, and I definitely, maybe that's how we all think as entrepreneurs, that we all have our unique stories, because I definitely feel like my journey has been different in the sense that I'm not necessarily building a company that I'm trying to sell one day. It's really kind of, I became an entrepreneur by accident, where it was more, I was working full time and realized that my freelancers were making more money than I was full time, and they had more time on their hands. And so that was kind of the big motivation for me to jump to being self-employed and starting my own company, was more kind of following a personal passion versus trying to build something. And not necessarily thinking it would be a forever job, but more of just an experiment to see and figure out more of what I like to do. At the time, I was working at an agency that did marketing as well as events. And I was just so busy and kind of overwhelmed. I couldn't have told you, did I like the marketing side more or the event side more? And turns out I like the event side more, because that's what I've stuck with. But hence the name Logan Strategy Group was pretty broad, because I wanted to be able to have the flexibility to kind of take it where I wanted to go. And I've constantly had folks telling me that I should turn it into an agency and scale up and build and hire folks. But I found this kind of special spot where it gives me, by being the only person full-time employed by my company, that I can then be flexible. Like when COVID hit, I wasn't worried about laying anyone off apart from myself, and having to kind of pivot. I'm sure other people might use that word today, but pivot and try something different. That doesn't mean I don't hire folks for different projects or events that I get where I need to scale up, but I don't have anyone else full-time under me, which just gives me the flexibility to get to go after different projects without feeling like I'm responsible for kind of other people's livelihood or other things like that. So it's just a different journey. It was self-funded when I first started. Again, I knew I had the thing that kind of helped me overcome the fear of jumping from full-time to being a solopreneur would be that I knew I could make enough money to cover my basic expenses, my rent, my groceries, everything I needed. And that was kind of the reason I made the jump. And I've been having a couple conversations recently with folks considering it, and they all talk about that fear. And I think it's just one that you kind of have to sit down and, understand what you need to kind of get by. And if you're in different financial situations, again, I was, single at the time, just me, no kids or anything that I had to worry about. It was just my expenses. And that was a big reason why I jumped out, because I knew that I could either go back to full-time employment with someone else, or I always told myself corporate America would always take me back if I wanted to stop doing it and working for myself. So I'm excited to be on this panel with everyone today, but just to tell you, there's a couple different options when you think of startup or entrepreneur that might look a little differently than what you're picturing.
Life can be good without employees.
Yeah. So no one's convinced me yet, Dan.
But if you raise a bunch of money, then you're forced to raise a bunch of employees. So it's always good before you raise money.
Yeah. Grass is always greener, I guess.
Right.
All right. Thank you for that perspective. Now we're on to Matt. So coming from the other side, the acquisition side. So you went from Microsoft to GitHub. What was that experience like? Kind of what did you end up learning? How are the needs and focuses different? And how did you make that transition?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. Logan's comment about all of us taking a different path into the vicinity of entrepreneurship it rings so true to me. Like to your question specifically, I went from Microsoft to GitHub. What was that experience like? Surprisingly easy. I think it helped that I worked on the acquisition team, but in that process, I got to know Mike Taylor, the GitHub CFO, and that team, and just really made some great connections. I learned a ton about what they did. If you asked me how I would make my way to working for a company that really supports, very like teams of single folks or very small folks. I would have never picked this path, but it actually looking back feels very organic, where I joined Microsoft, and I was looking back thinking, I'm getting a great experience here. I'm learning a lot. Looking back, I'm like, wow, I was at 150,000 feet, and we're basically astronauts. We're flying through the stratosphere, and I'm not getting a ton of experience. I then moved into our Azure business and did some business health work and then some business planning work, and got really connected with the teams at Microsoft who were building developer tools and building out developer services. And so started to get to know the developer community, started to get to know what the needs of folks who are building brand new things are. And it was just such a mind shift. I remember thinking, I came from central finance to Azure, and I thought I went from whatever, 50,000 feet to 5,000 feet. And then I came to I then, had the opportunity and came to GitHub. And then all of a sudden, looking back, I'm like, well, now I'm at about 1,000 feet. And then I talked to Logan, or I talked to Stefan, or, these folks, and I'm like, man, I'm still at this altitude. So I don't know, maybe my next stop is getting down there and walking on the ground. And it's been so fun making each of those clicks. I think, a lot of people ask me, like, what's the direction? And I think there's no right direction, right? Like, get a set of experiences that help everyone helps move you to like what the next thing is. And you may not know, can have a plan and hold it loosely is one thing I always say. And so like, it was a great experience. A lot of that probably has to do with the fact that I gotten to know the finance leadership team. I gotten to know the GitHub leadership team. It was a full job change. It was kind of shocking because we went through this acquisition, but one of the things I think Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, has done very well is kind of buy companies and let them do their thing. So GitHub operates independently. So I had to, I think it would have been about 4.5 years since I went to Microsoft, and I landed that offer in my summer between my first and second year. And so I hadn't interviewed in about 4.5 or 5 years. I'd completely forgotten how to do it. So thank God I knew the folks who I was interviewing with, but just a really delightful kind of experience. The needs and focuses are wildly different. I think the thing that I've enjoyed the most is having so much more influence and impact. And I know I'm saying that to this group who have just even, exponentially more impact in their jobs and in their kind of like day-to-day experiences than I do. And so, you went from having, a giant organization where you were on the edges and on the margin, kind of shaping some stuff, to really, every month I'm deep in our full P&L. I need to understand what's going on all the way from like our customer acquisition all the way down to like how much money, frankly, are we losing every month, and is that under control, and like can we continue to keep the spigot on from Microsoft. And so it's just been really exciting to go from focusing on something at a very, very, very high level to getting down and just sitting with our actual engineering, product design, security teams, and really thinking through like, what are the things we're trying to bring to our customers? And our customers might be, a giant corporation, or it might be a guy who's just, got together with two buddies in a college dorm room and is thinking about starting the next, the next Meta, Facebook, whatever you want to say. And so it's just been a lot of fun, but completely different day-to-day experience. I think I've been able to take a lot of what I learned in my tour at Microsoft and bring it. I think a little bit later on, we'll talk about how are kind of creative ways you've gotten to get into entrepreneurship, and I'll talk a little bit more about it there. But one of the things that's been exciting for me is I don't think I'm ever going to be the right number one or number two employee at a place, but I love being in a position where I can help shape a company that will help, founders and co-founders get their businesses started. Maybe they bring me in at about 50 or 100, and that's where my skill set starts to be useful. And so it's just been a lot of fun to find ways into that space, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But then the transition, just a lot of patience by people that I work with. My team, I came from having a team to having a larger team, and basically told them, give me about a year here to catch up and be there. So just a wild amount of patience. I think anytime you're making a transition that large, just inviting, asking for people's grace and patience with you is incredibly important. So I did that, and haven't looked back. It's been wonderful. Super tight team, And we just love being so close to the our development stack, and also so close to our developers on our platform. So a really fun ride, but like Logan said, no single path. I don't think I would have ever charted it this way. Just fun to get there, which makes it extremely exciting about what's next, right? I have no idea in 3 years or 4 years like where I'll be, but you know, it's fun. It's fun along the way.
Thank you. Thank you. And so moving to Stefan. So Dan has shared his experience with the business to business, and Matt has kind of shared what I don't know term is kind of a mix of the business to business, business to consumer. So from your perspective, how is business to consumer different from business to business, kind of in terms of how you've approached growth? And I guess the other interesting aspect of your business specifically is that you're dealing with actual physical goods, which I mean, maybe the other panelists would disagree, but it doesn't seem like any of the other panelists are truly dealing with inventory and physical goods in quite the same way that you are. So how is that, I guess, how has it been having to deal with that? How's that impacted your approach to growth?
Sure. Yeah. So when I bought Lamatera, it was 2015, like May of 2015. And right at that time, that was like early, you know, not super early, but I was still pretty early into Facebook advertising and really digital marketing that we've seen really explode here since about 2012. And so what drew me first to Lamatera was it was a very small company when I bought it. And it was, what drew me to it though is it had a customer base that I understood and I could grow from. They also had a super high quality product and really high level customer service. And then I also loved it because I could run it from anywhere and it would help me travel the world. So I hadn't really explored Central and South America. I was like, this could be super cool and let's give it a go. But what I really found as I got into it more, and I really learned, my background is in investment banking and in finance and then also management. I didn't have any marketing experience. So I've had to really teach myself marketing in particularly digital marketing as I've, you know, grown Lamatera. And what I find most fascinating about marketing, or, you know, direct to consumer marketing in this world, is that we can it's the psychology of the consumer at the other end of whatever it is for the advertisement, you know, in this case, let's say a Facebook ad, really thinking through their psychology of buying and positioning the product in a way that would resonate with the target customer that you're looking for. The ability to do that on such an individual by individual level is really fascinating to me, and something that I've really found to be, while I think it certainly happens for B2B, you know, I kind of think about B2B as you're selling to another business, which could be, and you're trying to solve problems for the business and trying to, you know, you're still marketing to them, and certain themes are the same between direct to consumer and B2B. But the ability to really focus on the individual that you're trying to target is really, you know, has been really cool to just to see and to think through, and to really, you know, force us to get to know our customers inside and out, to really picture them sitting at the other end of, you know, whatever medium we're using to advertise through. And I love the physical good aspect to it, because there's something to me, and I didn't realize this until I got into the business, but there's something about seeing something online and then having it show up in your door and going through that unboxing experience and seeing like, wow, this thing is real. And in our case, we often get the feedback that it's better than it looks online, which is pretty rare. I wouldn't say it's pretty rare, but there's plenty of companies out there where they're like, wow, that doesn't look anything like it, I want to return it. Ours tends to be the opposite. And it's that experience that goes along with just creating the whole direct to consumer experience, from really like putting, you know, the advertising out there to having it show up at their door, to any customer service inquiries. In this day and age, there's so few in our industry, there's so few times to really interact with that customer, that really nailing it from the introduction on the advertising side to the experience on the website to really over delivering through the experience of getting the package and getting the product has really been so much fun to really think through and work through. And with us, we've had great partners. We produce with artisans in Central and South America, some products completely, and some of it's like just the fabric for our products that we then produce. We then make the final good here in the US. So it certainly adds some complexity to the business. I also think it provides a good moat for the business, because it's not, even though style is really easy to or can be replicated, the story behind it, which we've really focused on telling, is very is much harder to replicate in a really authentic way. And I find that I've always kind of gravitated more towards a physical good than a service. And I think that's just, I don't know what that is yet, but it's just something that I feel and get excited about more.
I would love to just to comment on that real quick on a couple of things. So Stefan, one, obviously I hadn't heard of your business, but I actually shared with my neighbor doing this, and right away they did know your business. So that's good.
Oh,
that's
really?
a random person, more or less. So you are obviously getting out there. But more importantly, I think when you were talking about learning marketing, et cetera, and really the point you got to was you were able to define your customer and know the profile of your customer and target, and kind of grow your business in that way. And I think that is just such the essence of entrepreneurship. And that's like, and in terms of what I what I've heard referred to is customer development. And then also learning those. I think the other great thing is that I love your title in terms of your CEO, but then Director of Innovation. And I think it's so important as CEO can be everything, right? But I think it's so important that as a CEO, you also know what you're good at, and you enable yourself to focus on that, and then hire people, to do the other things. So I think it's always good, the CEO, and then they actually have but this is actually what I do.
Right. Yeah. And I found that out early. In the early days, I had to do everything because we didn't have the money to outsource. It was very much bootstrapped, and also at the same time, I put myself through that because I wanted to learn digital marketing from a fundamental level. And then it is really nice as things get going, and if things work out well, that you get to do what you said, and focus on your strengths, which has proven, it's all been fun along the way, but it felt particularly fun when you get to that point, which has been nice.
Exactly.
To kind of build on that one, so back to Stefan, and I'll kind of rope Logan in on this one too. So we're talking about that perspective of bringing in more help. So how do you know when is time to bring in more help? Have you navigated kind of figuring out who to bring on and what skills are needed to help a company grow? And I guess for Logan, how have you navigated working alone? But you've also mentioned that you do bring in part-time help when needed. So how have you kind of navigated that? So I guess we'll start with Stefan and then pivot to Logan, if that works.
Yep, I'm smiling when you ask the question because usually it's time to bring on more help. In the early days, it's time to bring on more help when I was, working way too much, or my wife would say, you need to find somebody else. So there's usually some external gauge in my case where, the business was smaller and I was, doing everything on my own and working 15, 16-hour days, 6-7 days a week. And you put in that sweat for a period of time, but you can also be consumed by it, and you don't always see that you could use help or need help. So it was really nice to have external perspectives from both my wife. Also, I have a CEO coach / advisor who's helped me along the way. But if I was going to distill it down for people, it's usually for me, it tends to be where it's I need to do something that I'm not good at and don't have time to learn it. And when I'm first starting out, I usually have the time to learn it, even if it feels like I don't, because it depends on what route you go. But like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to understand the fundamentals of Facebook advertising and digital marketing. So I thought that was really crucial for me to own and to learn versus outsourcing that. And I do think it saved us money over the long run. so it's usually like, is there something that I need to learn that I don't have time to learn? That might be something to hire out. Or it's like, am I just like, have I been ruining my quality of life for a long enough period of time where I need to like get help to allow me to have time to sleep and to work out and to do other things? And that's kind of been my gauge along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stefan, I think I hear you for using external people to gauge where you're at, because that's something that I'm like, sometimes you're too busy doing the work, you don't realize just how crazy the hours are. For me, it's been, I guess that I had a similar stance on kind of what I've outsourced. The first thing contractor kind of I hired was my accountant bookkeeper, because I dove into that, similar, it sounds like, to Stefan, to you teaching marketing. And I decided someone else who does this all the time is going to do this way better than me trying to teach it to myself. So that was the first person that I kind of hired. And it's an external kind of company, so not necessarily an employee, but someone to handle my books and just be a second set of eyes to make sure come tax time, everything was sorted. But more recently, it's because with 2020, with events, everything came to a close. So kind of I've been living more in these past 2 years. It's all of a sudden went from a famine of events to kind of now a feast. Everyone wants to do events. We all want to get back together again. We've learned virtual things like this are a lot more accessible. So there's a lot of work in my space right now. And I don't know if other sectors kind of do this, but kind of taken a little bit of a controversial opinion of actually networking with other people who do very similar things to what I do, and building a community of other, both solopreneurs, some folks who have small agencies, so that we can lean on each other when we have these larger projects and need to either scale up and I need to have a team of 10 under me, or I'm booked and busy on that date and I need to refer work out. And that has been probably the best tool that I've had to continue to stay solo, but able to take on bigger projects. But also for that balance, and speaking about that gauge, when there's only so much you can handle. I dealt with burnout last year. I think because 2020 was so slow and then 2021 became so fast, I've been also trying to better gauge my own personal excitement about what I'm doing and my passion for my events and work. So it's been nice to have a network of people that I can then refer work to if I don't have the capacity to take it on, and vice versa. It's been this really cool kind of like rising tide helps all boats kind of thing, where then I'm getting hired by those folks to help with their events in different roles. So haven't officially had an employee number 2. I do a podcast with another woman who has her own event company, and she's been playing with the idea, and just our discussions, she grapples with, who does she hire as her number 2? What does that look like? It's really helped me dig my heels in that I think I'm still in a good spot to stay on my own and have that flexibility. It sounds like some of the other folks here kind of use their business to follow their passions. And I like, my event stuff I'm passionate about, but I'm also passionate about traveling and spending time outside of what I do for work. And I think working for myself has been nice to kind of have that flexibility to take off for a couple of weeks if I want to. But it's also then at times when I had a crazy schedule, a couple weeks ago, I said, my boss she's really mean. And everyone's like, what do you mean? I was like, I know, I'm my own boss. I'm responsible for my crazy schedule. So that's something that I know I'm personally trying to figure out, but there still are days, I will say, where I've wanted to clone myself and wish there were 2 of me to do double the work, or that I had some of these other skill sets that I wish, but it's been a journey, I think, and I'm always open to it. I'm not completely shut off of hiring someone, but kind of to Matt's point earlier, I loved your quote there of saying, have a plan, but hold it loosely. I think that's how I've always seen the long-term strategy for my business is, current me is very happy just being a solopreneur and working with this community of folks who do what I do, because I can learn from them and I don't have the overhead of having them as employees. But I'm not saying in the future that wouldn't change, but I'm almost 6 years into it, and that opinion stayed the same this whole time.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, if any of you have questions, feel free to jump in, but if you don't, I will push off towards Dan and Matt here. So we're talking about kind of the topic of employment and how do you know when to bring on more people. And you both kind of fit into that category of people who are brought on. So how have you both figured out creative and clever ways to get involved with entrepreneurship? To go back to Matt's quote, when you aren't starting a company of your own, and again, to quote Matt, when your skills aren't a good fit for employee number 2. I guess, I don't know which one of
Yeah,
you
go
wants to
ahead.
start on that.
No, Dan, take it away.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so I have, in my background, I've had two companies that I've basically started and exited and built teams around those, and really love that process. And there's nothing like building your own team and making sure you're working with people you like and share the passion and the vision. But I've also been brought on to several teams, and that's really kind of what my current capacity is right now is the Playbook. And I'm coming on, basically what I'm doing is kind of building the bridge from a completely kind of CEO founder based kind of sales and marketing, effort, which is where most startups, go or initiate. And then, but then how do you, move from that to something that is scalable and such that you can actually build a commercial team or a sales team around. And that's a really that's a really challenging gap to fill, because the founder CEO is someone who, I mean, they know their product extremely well. They've probably been in the industry, so they have kind of their key relationships. And but oftentimes they kind of have their own way of kind of how they bring on customers, but that way usually isn't very scalable. And so oftentimes they'll bring on a head of sales, whatever, and they'll say, okay, there's this huge market. You should just be able to, hit the ground running here and start killing it. And, oftentimes that is not the case. And this really comes down to the concept of the Playbook. So I basically come in and kind of act, as I call it, as like the test pilot for the sales process. And so I kind of, collect all that information from the founder's head. I look at the market and I go out and kind of test this against company profiles, all the while thinking about, okay, if we hire a salesperson, if we tell them to do this X, Y, and Z, are they going to have a high probability of being able to convert a sale if they do that? And so I do that until we're able to kind of find a reproducible process that can generate sales. And then you can start bringing on commercial, you can start building a commercial team more confidently. But so I'm coming in and I'm having to kind of establish a relationship with the CEO founder. Having been one really helps, but oftentimes I have to come in, and while they're again saying, oh, I got it all figured out, I kind of have to go through and say, well, actually, I don't think we don't have it fully figured out here. And probably take a couple steps back before we can start running. And but again, I'm coming in as kind of a transitional role. And in fact, after I sold my last company, again, I was like, I'm not sure I want to dive right into the CEO role again or start a company from scratch. To me, it's like birthing another child, and everyone is different. And the most dangerous thing in my mind is a kind of a serial entrepreneur who starts to feel entitled or overly confident, because every single company is different, and you have to come in, with a lot of humility, with a lot of vulnerability, and knowing that you do not have it figured out, and with that learning mindset. So anyways, I had tried to do this on permanent and realized that doing this on a transitional basis really gave me that ability to kind of be very, to partner with the CEO in a way that says, okay, hey, we're going to go through this learning curve together. And again, the goal is to get the business to something that's really scalable. And so it's been that's been really interesting. And depending upon kind of the CEO, kind of the particular psyche and their approach, and whether they're very technology focused or whether they're very marketing focused themselves. But it's really rewarding to do that, to be able to find, that as Stefan was saying, he's taking that time going through that learning curve and finding, who is your right customer, who's ready to buy your product as is now, and let's focus in on that, and then really enable the growth of their business. So, and again, having had the CEO experience, it's really good to know, what it's like to be in their shoes. And then getting to the point where they're not having to work 18 hours, and then they actually can start bringing on people more confidently.
That ability to really extract the ability to extract that from the CEO's mind is really, that's a good skill. I would love to have more of you around, Dan, to take these ideas out and execute on them.
Yeah, well, the meeting point is the customer, right? And that's the
Yeah.
thing. It's not like I come in there and say, oh, I know better than you, or, because oftentimes they know it, but it's really a matter of coming in there and learning, and it's kind of, then you want to know, you want to pull all of their experience, but then you go out and then you do some of that verification. And so for me, it's always about, okay, let's make sure we know the customer. And so then it doesn't become a debate about who's, smarter, because you're never going to want to win that debate with the CEO.
Sure.
I'll just add, so kind of on the theme of kind of making your way into entrepreneurship, if you don't, if it's not in your DNA to be employee one or employee two, I think, for me, one of the things that I found that I do often is I put kind of what is entrepreneurship or what does a startup look like in a box, and I label it, and it looks like something to me. And one of the things I've had to learn is that it doesn't, you've got a number of panels here and it looks different, right, for all of them. There was a speaker that came through Darden one of the years I was there. I don't remember who it was, and maybe Hong Wu or Stefan do, but I remember him talking about, it was really profound. Like, he just came in, he was an outside guest speaker, and he talked about how, his strength was, not taking companies from 0 to 100, or from, his strength was 100 to 1 billion, right? 0 to 100, he was not your guy. 1 billion plus, he was not your guy. But he was like really good at this, like, hey, 100 to 1 billion is like really where I've hit my stride. And I think a lot of times I encourage folks who, want to, be part of a small company, be in a fast growing space. And like, you don't have to be employee 1, 2, 3, 10 or whatever. I found, like, personally for me, my skills, I hear you, talking, Logan, about like, when do you think about employee 2? Like, I shouldn't be on that list, but at some point somebody's going to be looking at employee 50, and you don't want employee 2 to be somebody who's going to come in and say, look, from a strategic finance point of view, I think what you should do is this, right? But at some point it's going to be, probably well before that, you should get an accountant and a lawyer, and like, there's some more basic stuff to do. But at some point, it does become very valuable, I think, for a CEO to have somebody who's able to come in and say, like, you have a menu of options of what to do with your capital, what to do with your opportunities, what to do with your time. Like, there are going to be things that I can help you with from a financial perspective, whether that's putting in, processes, or bringing a different framework of thinking about it, or doing all those things. And so I've often thought of, like, for me, entrepreneurship or kind of working for a smaller business looks like, how do I find those companies who are really starting to outgrow, that place where they can be a little bit more Wild West, and kind of need some, for lack of a better word, like adults in the room. And then you can come in and say, like, let me hold your hand and help you along a little bit. And then at some point also, right, important for me to step back and be like, great, you guys have made it to a place where, like, my skills are not at their highest and best use. And so how do we go find that next one that's like sitting at that spot where they're going, oh, we need somebody with some bring a little bit of structure and a little bit of, some different skills that maybe that CEO doesn't have. And so I just, encourage folks, who maybe don't feel like they want to start a company on their own, or they don't want to buy a company, with a small number of employees. Like, there are lots of ways to get involved and be involved with startups, be involved with other entrepreneurs, and be adjacent to them, that I think are just, easy to not see when we do tend to put entrepreneurship looks like this thing, and that's not me. I've just found, like, a dozen different ways to approach that and become adjacent to it and get involved with it, that play to my skills, and that mean that I'm bringing the highest and best use of my time to a company that needs it. And so just would encourage folks on the call who are thinking about it, but going like, I don't want to be employee 1. I mean, that's me. I'm sitting here like, I don't want to be a CEO. It's just not my strength, but I'd love to be a CFO or something, right? And so, but a company doesn't need a CFO in day 2. So how do I get involved in, like, a company at the point when it's ready to have that? And so just, like, encourage folks to think about different ways to play to your strengths to get involved in the entrepreneurship and startup game. It doesn't have to look like, this is what it looks like, and it can't look another way. It can look 100 different ways. Yeah,
that's a really great point on that. And, I think, as you say, there's a lot of different ways from which to be able to, I guess, have the entrepreneurial experience. But particularly if you're thinking of joining an early stage company, I mean, startups, it's all about stepping stones, just stepping from one to the other. And of course, obviously there's a vision oftentimes companies, don't end up with that vision, but that's how they raise money. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's all about, moving from one inflection point to another. And I think it's really important if you are talking with companies, understand kind of where they are, what's the next inflection point that they're working toward, and how can you really help move the ball to that next inflection point. And because they're going to sell you on the vision, et cetera, and that's exciting. But I think you should always push them, because when you actually get in, you start working, everything is about just getting, if you're moving from seed to Series A, or Series A to Series B, or moving to getting public company, everything that's happening is going to be focused on that. I mean, the CEO is going to be laser focused on moving that inflection point, and that's where you're going to be adding the most value and having the most success if your role is really impacting that.
Another thing that I want to call out is also, Matt made me think of this, is it was a term that I didn't learn about until I was at Darden, though I think it might be more widely used now, is the idea of an intrapreneur. And that's somebody who can be entrepreneurial within an organization. And I also think that that's worth calling out as well. So it's not exact. I mean, Matt's doing that in a certain way. You can also be, I remember somebody from, I think it was Marriott, came to work with one of our classes, and they were in Marriott's, like, I don't remember exactly what they called themselves, but it wasn't like an entrepreneurial group, but they were working on the design for hotel concepts that were focused on like the millennial consumer as they got older, 10 years from now. So there are also ways to be entrepreneurial that are within larger organizations and smaller organizations. So that's another route to also put out there that other people may want to consider.
Yeah, I mean, one of my best definitions of entrepreneurship is basically finding a way of doing what you love doing and doing it with people you really like working with.
Yeah,
I mean, just having that autonomy, because okay, I'll admit, I'm the oldest guy here, and you do get to the point, it's just like, I am never going to work with anyone who I don't want to work with again. Like, that's just not happening. But then also,
it took me a while to get there.
What's that?
I was saying it took me a while to get there, but
yeah, no, it does.
I totally experienced
that. Again, because the autonomy, and then again, you're also building your experience, right? And sometimes to build your experience, you have to do that, and that's a huge skill. I mean, we all have to do that, but there is a point where you realize, wow, I'm really happy when I'm working with people I like, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, but I think entrepreneurship is also thinking about, it's okay, how do I, really put myself in that position? But then I think the other thing is then having also the creativity of doing what you like. And for me, it's, I'm working on my own, but I also love working in teams. And so I found a way to do, I'm doing what I love to do, but now I'm working with 3 or 4 different companies, and I'm pretty well integrated in all of those teams. And that to me is fun, because I'm still experiencing that camaraderie and that team component that I love so much in startups, without actually having to, have everything on my shoulders.
All right. Thanks for all those very, very interesting perspectives on how to get involved and the creative ways to approach that. Now we're starting to run a little short on time, so we'll do a quick go around here before we open for questions from the audience. So I know each of you has been through, I'm sure, many, many challenges, but in a few sentences, let's go around and what challenges have you faced, and I guess a little bit of how did you either overcome them, or how did you get past them? So a couple sentences, minute or 2 each. And
well, I think I just said mine, so I'll leave that.
Okay.
As mine. You guys can go.
Yeah, I can start. I think something, Dan, you were just saying of getting to work with people that you like working with. That's something, and knowing your customer was something when I first started. It was really hard for me to define my target customer. When I do events, I said, I would do events with anyone. And I've slowly learned over time, there's people that I could probably do a great event for, but maybe personality wise, we're not the best fit. And, again, the end product would be great, but would I enjoy it as I got there? Probably not. So one of the challenges, like with COVID, when COVID had hit, I started a YouTube channel and making videos so that I could send links to clients of, like, if they had a question about virtual events, here's, instead of me explaining to you, here's a link. And it's created this really interesting funnel where I always joke that I never really wanted to appeal to the masses. And that's still not true now, but I've kind of found this core group of people who enjoy the videos that I've watched, and I've gotten random leads from the internet because of it, purely from folks that now like know me and enjoy my personality that I've never met before, which is still like wild to me every time I do a discovery call with them, and they're sold on me, and all I have to do is sell them exactly on what they need for their event, which, you know, takes out half the work. But it's funny now because I realized when I've talked to other entrepreneurs who've first been starting out that you don't necessarily need to know them, but you need to be okay with not, you know, being everybody's cup of tea, the right fit for everyone. And that is a two-way street that I know as I've gotten busier, it gives me that flexibility. Like you're saying, Dan, I get to be a part of teams that if I love working with them, I can keep working with them in future years. If I don't, you know, it's a project. And after that, I can move on and just kind of niching down into understanding who I want to work with. And that doesn't mean necessarily niching in the sense of like corporate or nonprofit or sports events, but more sometimes how the team is managed, what their workflows look like. Do they hit deadlines? You know, all those little things. So a challenge is kind of figuring out my target customer and my marketing, but I feel like I've started to find my group, which has been really rewarding, at least in the last year and a half.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like an echo chamber, and in the interest of time, like I'll just echo, for me, you know, things I've run into along the way where I found the biggest challenges are when I make a decision or I make a choice where I've got that instinct in the back of my head. I'm like, this isn't maybe the right team for me. And you think, well, but I've got this other list of 10 things that are all pros in this thing, and like I can ignore that one thing or those two little red flags that I had. And you just immediately, you know, it doesn't take more than a month or two where you're like, wow, I should have listened to that little thing. And so, yeah, just will affirm what you all have said is that people are just of paramount importance.
Yeah, I'll say for mine, one of the biggest challenges, we're actually going through it right now with their Apple. If people don't know, Apple made some changes that have made digital marketing a lot harder in the last year.
Yeah.
And so we're going through figuring out how do we reach our customers in new ways. And it's really forcing us to get creative. And we're looking at PR, we're looking at collaborations, we're looking at putting our products into hotels. And so like, that's one that we're like really in the middle of right now. But what's fascinating about this is that it's also forcing us to really get better at what we do and to think differently. And as kind of, you know, cheesy as that might be, because it's kind of like, it's, you know, but it's like seeing the problem for what it is, but it's not actually a problem. It's forcing us to get better and innovate in a way that's, if done right, makes you better at what you're doing. So we're in the middle of it right now.
All right. Thanks for all of that from all of you. And I think with that, we're going to open up for questions from the floor. So if anyone has any questions for any of our wonderful panelists here, if you could either add your question to the chat or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you.
I can ask one question. You know why I'm asking.
Go for it.
So it's a question from Matt. So Matt, you mentioned that you actually worked on the other side of the entrepreneurship. Like you actually were in the team that evaluated the acquisition of GitHub at Microsoft. So I wonder, like, if for some of us who may be like, for some of the entrepreneurs who may be thinking about exit options, like what are some of the things that, I mean, maybe we learned from business school, or maybe we read from the book, but for what are some of the things that's different from what people in generally like were taught, like any advice for like a founder who are looking at like maybe selling their companies from the other side of the table?
Ooh, well, that's a great question. I got to work on a few acquisitions. We said no to a number of them and said yes to a few of them. Most of them are these little small ones. GitHub was a bigger one. What's different than what I learned? I think of course, oh, look, I'm in finance. So like, of course, you know, you build all these great models when you're going through, you know, either business school or undergrad business school. Like it doesn't seem to work out. I had to take a break in the middle of the acquisition. We were headed to China to bring our son home, and I stepped away for a few months. And I had built a reasonable model that would have held up and as a good a good case in one of our classes. And then kind of it said, here's, I think, the price we could justify, I'm sure you guys are gonna stretch a little bit. And then they came back and they like tripled it or something. And so like I went to China, I left for a few months. I was on paternity leave for a while. I came back and they like tripled it. And at the end of the day, it was like, there's so much you can't quantify in it. And so, for GitHub specifically, Satya and Amy, our CFO, had, I think they have had great vision, a much better vision than some of the other acquisitions by prior CEOs, of kind of finding those places. If you look at LinkedIn or you look at Mojang with Minecraft or you look at GitHub, that are networks that have network effects, and then just kind of coming in and saying, how do we bring this in? And I will tell you, the first question in the meeting when we sat down to think about buying GitHub was like, can we not break this? Like, if we buy this, how do we go about not breaking it? And that was question number one. If we're just going to buy it and then break it, or we're going to buy it and go install our culture, or we're going to buy it and then go make it, look more like whatever we are, what's the point? And so I think that having a really profoundly strong company culture, makes you, I think in terms of when I'm looking at companies and I'm looking at acquisition, there's two that I look like. One is, I just want to buy, it's an acqui-hire, I want to buy your IP or your technology. I'm not really all that, interested in the thing you're trying to do. And the other side, and I think this is what most founder CEOs want to do, is to create something that's enduring, right? And create something. And I think what you can do to best position yourself for that, I think the reason, in addition to there being competitive pressures, in addition, like, I think the reason that a company, a person like Satya was willing to pay a lot more than the model that we would have built in finance at Darden would have told us, is because it had such a strong vision and culture, and that is what they wanted to acquire, and they were very keen on not breaking it. And so, for that CEO or that startup or that founder who wants to sell their company but also wants to kind of like endure, I'd say just be really clear on what your culture, like what it is that you're doing, and what is the value you're bringing to the world, because then you become a target for companies who want to sustain that, want to help you continue to grow that. Our approach, I think now, is we've got a giant, mountain of money sitting behind us, and we can go do a lot of things in terms of going and grabbing market share. We've got 5 startups, we call them the 5 startups in GitHub that we're trying to fund. All of these things would be wildly harder to do without, a company with 100 billion on the balance sheet standing behind us. But, key to that was GitHub having a culture and a mission and a vision that they wanted to sustain. And so, as you're building those and you're looking at acquire like that, don't discount how important that is to the folks that are looking to like bring you in. That was a hugely important thing for us when we were looking at GitHub, is they were the largest open source developer community in the world, and we wanted to supercharge that, not integrate it and change it. We wanted to, how can we make that growth just explode as opposed to tuck it in.
And I know we got to wrap up. I know we got to wrap up here, and I think that there's a topic in terms of M&A, but particularly in terms of an entrepreneur moving into selling their business. And not to have a spoiler alert, but the 2 times I've had to be treated for depression, it was while I was selling my business. It has got to be one of the most traumatic, challenging times in life. And I would, if we turn this Virginia Entrepreneurship Northwest into a series, I think we could have that as one topic.
I love the idea.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit? Like, I'm not sure if we have other questions.
Well, I know where I did. I mean, I know I'm sensitive to time, and also if there are questions, but I'm happy to expand on it a little bit. But
any other questions? So if there's no questions, go for it, Dan. I think that's a great topic.
Okay, yeah. I mean, and I will make this thing. I mean, I think the main thing is that you never want to have a mindset where you're like, I guess, trying to sell your business, right? You want to be bought. You want to be sold. But in the case of where you have investors, and in my case, and particularly the most recent case, investors, and obviously there's there's timelines of those funds, et cetera. There's a point where, okay, you got to start positioning your business, or at least understanding who are the potential buyers, et cetera. then once you're doing that, and once you even just start putting your toe in the water, you're going to have some, you have potential buyers. You're like, oh, this is really great. We're going to have someone come in and, tell us all the great reasons they want to buy the business, when in fact, they're going to come in and basically tell you everything what's crappy about your business, because they're trying to, obviously they don't want to pay anything for it. And so it's, and that's where, and so really, and you spend a lot of time and you're going through these meetings, and literally they're just pointing all these things out that, and as an entrepreneur, I mean, you have to be, optimistic, right? I mean, there's a challenge around every corner. And if you start hearing these things and then you start believing these things, then you become overly focused on that. And yeah, and it's really tough. And I had to, we kind of went through we didn't do a full process, et cetera. Again, our board was kind of just wanted to get a sense, but I found it totally threw me off kind of the focus and orientation of the business, and in terms of leading the team, et cetera. And then it got to the point where I realized, like, wow, I just need to stop this completely, and then kind of refocus the business, and then really got to the mentality of, we just need to keep the heads down. And yeah, we kind of have our house in order. In other words, it's nice to have the data room in order. You have, all of the information, and have your pitch deck and have that all there. But, at the end of the day, you just keep your head down. And then when someone comes along and starts first telling you everything that's great, then you might start listening to them, because at the end of the day, it's going to be about timing. It's going to be about the right buyer. Just a lot of those different pieces have to come together. And when they do, right? And it, but you can't really kind of force that to happen. So I think it's just a really a challenging time. My first business that I sold, it was just that was just inexperience. It was just a bad deal. I took way too much stock. The company that bought it, that I thought was good, and that wasn't even good. So there's experience as well, but having the right flow is really key. There's a book, and I don't have a ref, so there's a book called Exit Bomb, which basically talks about all of the trials and tribulations and massive pitfalls of selling a business. So if you ever want to learn more, get the book Exit Bomb.
Thank you.
All right. I think on the topic of exiting, I think it might be time for us to exit the meeting. I really appreciate all the panelists for taking the time to join us, both for this, but also the time and patience as we prep for this. And of course, thanks to all the audience members who came to hear what these fine panelists had to say. And yeah,
well, and Tilden, Hongwu, thank you guys for all your efforts and pulling this together.
Yeah, thank you guys.
No problem.
And thank you guys.
Thanks everybody who came.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I
Thank
think
you.
that's, again, this is the first one, but I think we should again definitely think about doing more. And I will certainly be an attendee, if not a panelist.
All right.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
we will definitely look into this. I think this is a start, and we'll definitely do more. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly plenty of topics to cover in the future, and plenty more questions to get into. So, all right. Well, I think with that, we'll close up, stop the recordings, and call it a night. Thanks again.
everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.